Hello, my name is Annie McTaggart,
And I'm Callie Miller.
and we are both two first-year world scholars who studied abroad in Madrid, Spain, our first semester.
For this podcast, we are investigating the physical accessibility in the freshman sites for the World Scholars Program and the protocols that the program has in place for those who have accessibility issues.
So we decided to streamline our focus on accessibility to physical accessibility, which can be defined as physical functional differences, which focuses on a different range of abilities with two types of conditions, mobility and systemic related conditions. Because we decided to pick physical accessibility due to our lack of exposure to possible resources, as well as alternatives for disabled students who were looking for accommodations within freshman sites of the World Scholars Program.
Okay, so for our investigation process, we decided to do an interview, and we interviewed a representative of the program. We had some questions that we thought would best be answered if we were to actually talk to someone who's familiar with what's going on. So that was our basis for gathering data.
So we asked a series of questions, but one of our main questions was about the preparation by the World Scholars Program, investigating what they had prepared, information to give to students who had physical accessibility needs. But when we discussed with the World Scholar representative, we came to learn that it was mostly anecdotal information. Largely, physical accommodations are made on a case-by-case basis, and there's not necessarily anything set in stone per se by the World Scholars Program for accessibility.
Yeah, when we were talking with the representative, we just kind of got the general impression that, they just are more reactive than proactive in their planning for this, and that they don't have a lot of prepared accessibility tools. I mean, we asked about if there was any prepared material for them to discuss.
Just even a handout, and
there was nothing. Yeah, because there's a big thing. The big thing with pre-departure orientation is people want to gather as much information as they can, and just having something would be very useful.
And what the representative did say is they talked about it briefly in the interview, but I'm not sure how much that would have helped, because again, not everyone who does the interview chooses to go to the program. Having something at pre-departure orientation, I feel, would be helpful in helping a student feel like they have what they need to go abroad, as well as the parents. So
yeah,
but that was that was what we found from that question.
And I think another thing that we talked a lot about was the process for with the freshman sites. Do they have places that they are able to send disabled scholars that they know they have these tools,
specific locations maybe?
Yeah.
And the representative did sort of go through and be they were talking about, well, this place has Auckland has a hill, or something about a dorm here and there, but it wasn't necessarily there's not one location that's physically accessible necessarily. It's more of you kind of have to weigh it out. That's what it more sounded like. So.
And the representative definitely had to really think about okay, wait, let me think about what I know about the sites that I've been to, and just kind of started to kind of guess a little bit at what was there and what they had available, which you want to make sure in a case as important as making sure that a scholar has all that they need. You want to
for their
be sure.
first semester at college in a foreign country.
Yeah, you want to be 100% sure what they have available for them.
And what the rep did discuss was They said that the locations were chosen for the freshman sites because of like what resources they had there, but when we like sort of tried to ask more about like what exactly like their like disability support services were like at the locations abroad, we didn't really get much information back.
Yeah.
So although like they said, having these programs were important in choosing a location, we didn't really get much definitive, okay, but this location has this, like, you know what I'm saying, like,
yeah,
it was less of defined even like for the locations abroad as well. So,
and the representative also told us like they're not familiar with all of the sites.
Right.
That is definitely more of the leader of the program's expertise.
Well, we were unfortunately unable to interview.
To contact, yes.
So that does leave some holes with our questions to be hopefully answered in the future, but we were able to get some useful information from the interview that we were able to conduct. Yeah.
And I think that another, with our experience in the World Scholars Program, we know, a little bit about just general, like, European, structures and where some of those challenges might be. Obviously, you can't fix all of Europe.
You can't change a city. Like, that's just not something that you can do. But even just, like, considering, like, I know the students who went to Rome, like, they, like, I was talking to one of them, and they were like, yeah, no, there would have been no way, like, anybody with a wheelchair would have been able to, like, navigate the streets just because they were so cobblestone, like, and they were so bumpy. Versus, like, in Madrid, like, it was more, like, there were sidewalks, and it was, like, relatively accessible with, like, curb dips and such. But, so just, like, even just, like, that information, like, okay, like, yes, like, if the university we were sitting at was in a more modern area of the town versus like, in Rome being in like an older area, like just that information, like knowing that to inform your decision of like what location to go to if you have physical needs, would be something important. Like even as early as like the interview process, and like up to pre-departure orientation, because by then you would have already selected like your site, but you would want to know that information
beforehand
before you've put your deposit down. So
yeah, and just having the program have ideas as to alternatives. We have mandatory trips that we have to take, and like I know for one that some of the places we went, like Toledo, were like it's like one giant hill, and that
and like even
poses
for
challenges.
Like many of like physically fit world scholars, like there's a lot of us, and most of us were struggling. Like, I mean I have serious like joint problems, and I was like struggling that entire day. But maybe just working to create maybe different like alternative day trips in locations that are accessible, or with like tour groups that work better with like physically accessible needs and whatnot.
And even just having, the rep that we talked to had mentioned with one of the scholars that they had in the past who had, physical accessibility needs, they mentioned that they would always check in with them before trips, like on their energy levels, and making sure that they felt up for trips, and even just continuing to offer that option of like, you don't have to go if you are not feeling up to it, is very important. And a good thing that they have currently in place for scholars.
But another thing about that student who was able to go abroad with physical accessibility or physical accommodation needs, was that the rep did say that the contact was done like very shortly to actual departure to go abroad. So they said that it was like pretty rushed information wise, communication wise. So that like leads us to the question of like, well, like where in the program is there like a definitive like time to like reach out about accommodations and needs and whatnot? Because yes, it is addressed in the interview shortly. Like, it's a question that's asked of the possible future world scholar. But not everyone is comfortable sharing their like needs, or they might not even know exactly what accommodations are available to even like ask for them. So that was just something that we were curious about as well, and we didn't get much from our interview like for that specifically, but in the future maybe that's something that could be looked at, maybe a pre-departure orientation with communication with DSS, disability support services, like on campus at UD, but also like communicating with the DSS services abroad, so the student can have a better understanding of what is available to them.
For this project, we had a very short turnaround time to get our interviews done that we wanted to get done. And we had several ideas for who we wanted to talk to, lots of different people, but due to the short turnaround period, it was difficult to get in contact with some of the leadership that we wanted to talk to. So we were only able to do the one interview that we did. And we found that in general, communication, even on a long-term scale with the program can be a challenge.
One experience that I had was when I was like getting ready to put my deposit down and decide to enroll in the program. My passport was not good for 6 months after departure, which is what they said they were required for the program. So I reached out different ways, multiple different times, and I heard nothing back. So eventually I did not renew my passport before we left because of just the possible time it would take to renew a passport. So I just stayed with my one that would be a little bit short of the supposed required date by the program. But this was before I was even, this was before orientation, this was before I was enrolled in the program, and I heard nothing back. So, and I was not the only person who experienced this. There were multiple other people who had similar questions, who were unable to contact anyone within leadership to get any form of information and get their questions asked. And it's almost like a chronic problem, I feel, because in the realm of physical accommodations and physical accessibility, students and parents are going to want to know what the program has to offer. They're going to want to be informed before sending their child away to a foreign country for their first semester of college. And I think communication is such a vital part of that, especially because the World Scholars doesn't necessarily have anything prepared to hand out to students and families. And it's more so a case by case, okay, this is what you need, okay, we can do blah blah XYZ. And their experience with the one student who had a physical disability who went abroad, they said that the person communicated very late. But people who reach out early may not be able to get their questions answered in a timely manner, and that could affect whether or not a person decides to stick with the program.
Exactly. I mean, I personally, my roommate, they have several medical issues, and they wanted to just double check that everything would be squared away, before they signed up for the program, because they wanted to make sure that they would be able to have all their needs met. And they tried to get in contact with the program. They were unsuccessful. They tried, multiple times, multiple different modes. And they eventually contacted the school to say hey, can you contact the program for me? I can't get a hold of them. And even the school couldn't get a hold of the program. And so since the deadline for housing in Delaware was coming up, my roommate just decided to drop the program and just sign up for on-campus, housing and classes for a semester. So that, just that initial communication is so important.
It's vital for someone who wants to be a part of the program. And this is not us trying to like bash how, like, the World Scholar is not a horrible program, but it's so valuable that people need to be informed in order to make the decision to do something as unique as the World Scholars Program.
Exactly.
Especially if you have like differing needs, differing accommodations that you require to function. And so that was a big reflection point in this project as well, was just the importance of communication and the places and modes through which it's lacking.
And, going back to what you said about, not bashing the program, we the whole point of doing this project is also just we want everyone to be able to experience what we experienced, because it was such a great time.
Such a valuable experience beyond just, like, the classroom, And, World Scholars is marketed to not every major, but a large variety of majors, besides some certain sciencey ones. And just that differing of majors is wonderful. You get to meet people who have, like, different interests than you, different hobbies from different places. But in our cohort, there was not necessarily a person who had any physical, accommodations or, like, needs that we know of, right? So I think just having the conversation about accessibility and making World Scholars something that would truly be open to students with differing needs would just enhance the program and, diversify the student population involved, and help more people get, like, this amazing experience.
Exactly. It's just something that, we really valued our time there, and, opening up the conversation to, making these changes and, attempting to make these accommodations not only benefits people who need those, like, physical accessibility measures, it just generally opens up the conversation to students' needs in this program. And it's just, it would really benefit everyone if the program were, to really tune into this and try to work out, okay, how can we make this experience better?
Right. And, like, the whole experience with World Scholars requires a complete leap of faith.
Yes.
Like, you don't know these people in the program. You don't know, you may not be from the state of Delaware. Like, you may know nothing, and you're going to a foreign country for your first semester abroad. And, like, that requires a lot of faith from the parents' end as well. And parents will want to know, they do want to know what students are going to be doing, like, what is involved in the program, like, want to know a lot. And if the program is lacking information about accommodations and mobility needs and, like, differing physical accessibility based on, like, locations, then it might be hard for someone to put their faith into, like, going somewhere where they don't know if they're going to be accommodated.
Exactly. And having this kind of general unknowns about what they have available also affects, physically abled students, because if someone is to, obtain an injury of any sort and, have issues, with mobility, they're in the country, what are they going to do?
Right. Because you can't just stop and not do anything if you, like, break your leg or something. You're still going to have to figure out how to get around.
Exactly.
In a place where it may not be super accommodative to people with differing mobility needs.
We even had a student in our cohort early on who got an ankle injury, and they had issues, like, they tried to go on some of the mandatory trips, and it was difficult for them, and they were, having a bad time.
Yeah.
So, just these conversations just benefit, like we said before, everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
Going forward, some of our recommendations for improvements would be, before and during pre-departure orientation, having a stronger DSS contact, you know, making sure that they have a way for you to contact them and have, you know, someone there, whether it's a pamphlet or like a breakout session that you can go and ask your questions, making sure that they have that solid connection with DSS from the beginning is going to make a huge difference in people's decision-making process.
And ability to just feel confident in their ability to get accommodations.
Exactly.
And hopefully by having someone, like having a contact available or having someone to talk to early enough, like at pre-departure orientation, which is in June, typically for most people, the students would have enough time to have the accommodations they need successfully like implemented by the time they go abroad, and have enough communication and have enough time so that conversations can be had, and conversations with UD staff and staff at the location abroad, just to make sure that the student is able to get what they need.
Exactly. Also, having a better line of communication with the program itself, just having someone kind of designated to just answer emails with questions, because, you know,
a lot of people have a lot of important questions.
And, you know, the leaders of the program, you know, they're really busy. I mean, the program is such a delicate balance, and it's so complex.
Complicated, and there's a variety of different needs for each location and different students.
And they're just so swamped, and it's hard for them to answer emails in a timely manner.
And you know, and that's a struggle for people, for many different students before they go abroad, as we had mentioned previously, just the struggle with communication. But by having like a designated email possibly, or someone who it's like their responsibility to answer these emails, hopefully that would allow students and families to feel more comfortable, feel more knowledgeable about the information that they feel like they need to have their child or have themselves go abroad.
Exactly.
And then when thinking about long-term goals, as the World Scholars Program continues to grow, it is likely that more freshman sites could be added. And just something after doing this project, we think it would be vital to incorporate physical accessibility needs in the thought process of picking a location.
Exactly.
Because at the moment, with the locations that have been set, like, yes, many of these, they're American universities, have robust programming, but we think that it's largely a retrospective way of planning for these physical accommodations. It's almost like an afterthought, sort of like trying to fit them back into a puzzle that's already like full. Yeah. So maybe having accessibility physically, at least that's the focus of our project, but even in a broader sense, in the conversation when planning to add another site would be, we think, very important.
Yes. And, you know, having that option of, you know, when people ask, is there a site that, you know, because I'm in a wheelchair, I could access.
Right, it would be the best for me.
Or be the best for me. Having, like, that solid answer of this location
this would be great.
Has great accessibility protocols, and this is the location that we would recommend for a student who has physical accessibility needs, is just something that could really benefit the program.
And it would boost, like, that person's confidence, we think, as well.
Exactly. So to wrap up, you know, going forward, we just think that the program slowly implementing, you know, changes like this, like the ones we discussed, could really help not only students who, you know, need this accessibility, it just helps all the students and opens up that communication for student needs.
Right, and it allows the World Scholars Program to actually be marketed to even more students and have more interested students actually feel like this program has their best interests in mind.
Exactly. Making sure that they feel comfortable and, just that people can experience, this really cool experience.
Right, because I absolutely loved my experience. It was probably the best decision I ever made. And I learned so much about myself and made such interesting relationships with the people around me that it's something that I want to share. And I think at the moment, there's just this bit of a wall for those who need these accommodations, who need, who have mobility and physical requirements and needs. And I think that just by having the conversations, having the planning, contacting DSS, implementing these measures and the recommendations that we've talked about would ultimately just benefit World Scholars as a whole.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for listening, and this is Callie and Annie signing off.